If Donald Trump were a black Democrat who had slashed the disaster response budget, gutted FEMA, and cut funding for the very agencies responsible for predicting and warning us about catastrophes, Charlie Kirk would be on a 30-minute rant about how he's a DEI president and this is what happens when you hire based on wokeness. But because Donald Trump is a white Republican, Charlie Kirk instead went full scavenger mode, digging through the internet to find one black person he could blame. And he's reaching so hard to make the connection, if he had a muscle to pull, it'd be off the damn bone by now.
We are in a state of national mourning, as we should be. And the Democrats, they're so despicable. The Democrats are not lifting a finger to remember the well over 100 people that have died in Texas Hill Country. What you are not being told by the media anywhere is that the death toll likely would not have been as high if it wasn't for DEI. This Texas tragedy is just the latest example. It's not just incompetence. This is DEI working to undermine meritocratic institutions, and more people likely died than otherwise would have because of DEI. Let me prove it to you. You know, when you're putting out fires, you got to make sure that you have a diverse fighting force. All jokes aside, well, the pressure was on the city to prove its diversity credentials. So a few years later, they picked Joel Baker as their first black fire chief. He announced right away that promoting diversity is one of his top priorities. They brought him in from Atlanta, and his priority was not putting out fires or being prepared for floods. No, his priority was to make sure that the fire department was blacker.
Now, usually I'll editorialize a video like this, but I was going through the comments and I found a comment that completely expresses exactly how I feel about this asinine argument that Charlie Kirk is trying to make. So I'm going to read that comment to you guys, and thanks to Joe Tugger on X for this comment. He says, "You're using the death of children to push your anti-DEI agenda, and it's genuinely disgusting. You don't care about the facts, and let's be real, you probably don't care about the kids either. This is just another chance to score points and push your racist brand. Even a tragedy becomes fuel for your culture war nonsense." Let's address this. You claim DEI hiring is to blame for what happened, but Camp Mystic isn't even in Austin. You blame the Austin Fire Department, but they had no jurisdiction and didn't delay rescue operations. You suggest DEI leadership cost lives, but the flooding was caused by a 26-foot river surge in 45 minutes due to extreme weather. You ignore the fact that the cabins were built dangerously close to the river and that the camp's disaster plan was approved 2 days before the flood. None of this had anything to do with race, DEI, or who was hired, but instead of addressing real issues like poor infrastructure planning, emergency response breakdowns, or climate denial, you weaponized this tragedy to spread lies and blame black leadership. You don't mention conservative leaders who cut disaster response budgets, politicians who gutted FEMA grants, or the camp operators who built cabins in a floodplain and approved inspections 2 days before the storm. You could point fingers at any of those things if you were honest, but that doesn't fit your narrative. Are all those people DEI hires too? And the worst thing is people in the replies are eating it up like it's gospel. No critical thinking, just vibes, hate, and scapegoating. If y'all cared about actual accountability, you'd be asking, why were kids still in those cabins after a flood watch was issued? Why were no mass alerts sent out? Why did the camp pass inspection right before the storm? But nah, DEI is just the easier target. This is sick behavior, a pathetic excuse for a human being using grief as a weapon. God damn, he is absolutely right. Charlie Kirk is full of shit. He was trying his best since this disaster to find a black person to blame this on, to somehow blame it on DEI and wokeness, and everybody sees through it except for the dumbass Magas who follow his page. Period.
Don't want no enemies or ops. Envy in their heart, I tell them stop. Vacation on the yacht.